Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. Founded in 1976 by 13 visionary women leaders, CMC connects people and ideas through community conversations at forums just like this one nearly every week. I'm Doug Buchanan. I'm editor-in-chief of Columbus Business First. I'm also proud to serve on CMC's Board of Trustees. I'm also chair of its editorial advisory board, the program committee. So if you have any positive feedback about today's forum, I'll be sitting right over there. If you have any negative feedback or complaints, the other Doug Buchanan is actually in charge, and he's right over there. Let's thank the organizations that help make today's community conversation possible: Accenture, Patel, Otterbein University, Regionomics, and the United Way of Central Ohio. Let's have a hand for them. We would also like to thank today's forum partners, Aspire and the Ellis, and we're also grateful to the presenting sponsor of our live stream, the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation, and to our live stream partner, the Columbus Dispatch. Every CMC forum takes a village. Let's thank everyone who supported today's program. One more time. Okay, welcome to today's forum. Open every door, transforming workforce development in Central Ohio. Will an innovative new collaboration help Central Ohio attract and build the workforce that it needs? The Central Ohio Workforce Development Network is a new large-scale collaborative between 13 organizations that backers say will open a new wide pipeline funneling eager workers to employers. With a panel of employment advocates and regional leaders, today we'll unpack this newest effort to keep Central Ohio's talent pool filled to the brim. To introduce today's panelists, please welcome Dr. John Comerford, president of today's sponsor, Otterbein University.
Thank you, Doug. It's a real pleasure to be with you today. My name is John Comerford. I get to be the president of Otterbein University and the president of the Coalition for the Common Good with our partners at Antioch University. We jumped at the chance to sponsor today's forum because what we do as educators is we are workforce developers. And higher education is a mess in a lot of ways, and one of those ways is we traditionally put on a program and we cross our fingers and really hope it's what you employers want, but we never actually ask you. And we need to do better than that. And so at Otterbein, we've done things like build the point and bring employers onto campus, requiring every undergraduate to have an internship, study abroad, or another immersive experience before they graduate. Our partners at Antioch University are doing professional development work inside of companies, upskilling, certification programs, recompletion programs at a half a dozen Central Ohio companies, including InnoSource, Nationwide Children's Hospital, et cetera, et cetera. This is the future. The future is partnership together, educators and those who need the workforce working in partnership. So we're glad to be here today. I'm pleased to be able to introduce our panelists today, who are Tony Cunningham, president and CEO of the Goodman Guild, Lisa Devine, who's manager of talent acquisition for Worthington Steel, Scott Johnson, who's director of Central Ohio Workforce Development Network, and our moderator today will be Bo Chilton, the CEO of Impact Community Action and former Otterbein employee. I just learned that really is his greatest qualification. And Doug Buchanan, the other Doug Buchanan, will be taking questions from the online forum. Please welcome our panelists.
Well, good afternoon. Let me first say thank you to Lisa Pat McDaniel, who is CEO of the Aspire, formerly the Workforce Development Board of Central Ohio. It was her vision in concert with Marge Pizzuti, who had the idea to bring together the organizations to work on this collaborative in a new way, and I'm grateful to share more information with you about that. I also want to thank my co-chair in this work, Ryan Burgess from Goodwill. We could not have made the progress that we have made without your leadership and your efforts. So thank you to both of them and the 13 organizations who have come together to address workforce needs and challenges systemically so that we can make a collective impact. I have not been this excited about 13 individuals or individual organizations coming together for one purpose since the announcement of Wu-Tang Clan's reunion tour last year. So Scott, with that excitement and the energy that we have coming together, tell us more about what this new workforce development collaboration is all about.
Thank you, and thank you to everyone for being here today. It's an honor to get to share our work with you. The Central Ohio Workforce Development Network, as Bo said, is a collective impact effort where we have 13 organizations who provide quality workforce development services within our community who are trying to identify ways that we can scale and do better. We also have the support of One Columbus and Aspire, so we're really trying to streamline how we think about workforce. For the employers that are in the room, you don't want to have 13 different relationships if you don't have to, do you? It's a way that we can help you connect with great talent very, very quickly. When we first formed back in April as our first official effort, and keep in mind we're about 5 months official now, we did a survey of all of our member organizations. And there were a few things that we found that I think would be really valuable for you to know. One is that when we add up all of the organizational experience, the length of time that these organizations have been in existence, it's over 500 years of experience. When we ask about the number of full-time employees they have to support our residents with workforce and workforce-adjacent services, we're up to almost 2,500 employees. And when we talk about the number of residents that walk through their doors on any given day, it's around 100,000 people annually. So as we talk to employers, if you need talent, we have a source for you. As we're talking to job seekers who are walking through the door, we want to get you with the right organization, the right program, the right partner so that you can thrive and excel in the way that you want to actually see economic mobility lift up the way that it should.
All right, and so this idea of no wrong door, Tony, you've been around for a little while. How does this effort differ from previous collaborations?
Thank you for the question. Excited to be here. Thank you for the invite. So, no wrong door. When you think about individuals that we all support in the community and all of the things that they have on their plate, there's a lot. There's survival that's happening, right? I'm trying to figure out how to navigate. Many of them are on multiple services in the community, and everywhere you go, they need to process you, they need to ask you your personal information, they have you running here and there, thither and thon. You don't have this document, you gotta come back, upload this, send this, email that. And so when you think about no wrong door, we need to make it easy for the job seeker to access and make sure that we have a way to bring them in with dignity, that provides them an opportunity to tell their story one time and not relive trauma over and over again. And then make sure that we send them to a place that's gonna serve them the best. And what I always tell people is that we used to fight for numbers, right? Oh, I can't send you to someone else because I got my numbers and I have my funder and I'm required to serve X number of people. But at the end of the day, if we can get this right, I should be receiving even as I'm sending. Because in the network, with no wrong door, if they've been assessed, oh, you would be better served at Godman Guild. However, Godman Guild has seen someone to be better served at Impact or Goodwill. And so there's this piece where it's all about the job seeker and what they need versus it being about us and what we need. And when you put them in the center of it, then I think you get better results because you get people served with dignity, you get them where they need to be, getting what they need to access, and that then results in greater success.
Excellent. Lisa, I understand that Worthington Steel is part of a manufacturing collaborative, COMP. Can you tell us more about that collaborative and what your objectives are?
Yes, thanks so much everyone for being here and thanks for having me. So I serve on the board of COMP, and that industry sector partnership really is a collaborative of manufacturers and workforce development and education partners. And we really are working together to solve challenges in the workforce from an industry standpoint, but also for our folks in the community. We realize at COMP that as manufacturers, we can't do it alone, right? And if a company the size of Worthington Industries or Worthington Steel, right, Honda, if those folks can't solve their workforce challenges, then it's very difficult for smaller manufacturers to solve these problems. So working And this collaborative with our partners helps us to solve those problems. And whether you're trying to look for a handful of employees or if you're looking to hire hundreds of employees, it's all the same challenges, right? How do we find the right talent? How do we get them trained up to be ready to enter our workforce? That's really what we're there to solve.
And Lisa, we know that there is a fierce competition for talent. What are some of the things that you have done to try and make sure that you can not only acquire, but retain good talent?
So at Worthington Steel, it is truly a race for talent, right, among there. And at Comp, we realize that we are not each other's competition, right? We have to work together. But specifically at Worthington Steel, we're all about developing our employees. We want to be continually hiring for entry-level roles so that we can develop our people and grow them and give them the skills that they need, not just to have a good-paying job, but a great-paying career. So that's really what we're after. We would say probably at our facility here in Columbus, about 90% of our employees get a promotion within 6 months of employment. So we need them to have those entry-level skills. We need them to have those soft skills too, are so much more important sometimes even than the technical skills for us. So accountability, communication, problem solving, those things are really important to us. We can teach them to do the other things. So having them have those things get in the door and we can develop them and grow them, that's our goal.
We've talked about the idea of a collaboration and working together as a collaborative versus competing. And that sounds good in theory, but what does that really look like in practice when you have organizations that are competing for resources? Resources are starting to become a little more restricted. How does that really work in practice? Tony or Scott?
Well, I would say, number one, they drafted me to be on the hardest committee in the group because I have to build infrastructure and systems and processes internally of how we'll work together. And so we had this conversation, and I think it's going to be important how we build trust. It has to start with trust because we are all nervous. I'll be honest with you. I don't have an amazing budget right now. We're all budget constrained. We're all struggling for resources. We all want to show our values so that we can attract funding. But we have to have this level of trust where we believe that if we're a part of this ecosystem and it's working the way it should, everyone will have what they need to do what they need to do. Right? And so one of the ways that we're talking about that is, and for those members know that a survey is coming, but we really want people to take a good look at their organizations and tell us, what are your top signature strengths in each of your organizations? There are a lot of organizations that do a lot of things. But if you really drill down, there's probably 2 or 3 things that they do really, 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 really well so that we can make sure of all the complement that we have in the ecosystem. We've got people who focus very well on skill-based training. We've got people who go really deep on professional skills development. We have people who have really strong workforce-adjacent programs. We need to understand our profile, right, so that we can know what we have in the network, then build the trust to know that if I send, again, I go back to, if I send someone to you, I believe someone's coming to me. So I will have what I need, and then as a group, we can attract more resources on a larger scale that can then be shared among those of us in the ecosystem that are getting the work done.
Yeah, I think the thing that I would like to add to that, as we look at the talent pool that's available for us right now, a lot of people aren't aware of an initiative that United Way at a national level launched, which is called United for ALICE. ALICE households are households who are asset limited, income constrained, but employed. So those individuals are above the federal poverty level. They're not receiving benefits, but they can't pay their daily bills. When you start to look at those below the federal poverty level and those that are below the ALICE household threshold, it's 39% of our community. And so what we see is that that population isn't walking in our doors because they don't have time to think about that. They're worried about paying their bills, keeping the lights on, keeping food on the table. And every month they have to make a decision on what they will and what they won't pay. So part of what we're working on with this idea of identifying, we keep calling it our North Star. Like, what's the North Star for each of our member organizations? Once we have that identified, we can figure out how we can help people slow the grind that they have to pay their bills so that we can help them accelerate and go through professional development. You know, Lisa, I think it's amazing that you said 90% of all of your entry-level employees see a promotion in 6 months. What does that do for the psyche? It tells me that I'm capable. It tells me that I'm ready to do more. And so if we can find a way to help individuals stop working 2 or 3 or 4 jobs to survive, that will mean a lot for us. For a family of 4 right now, according to the most recent report that was released, and thank you, Michael Wilkos, for reviewing this with us last week, it actually takes a family of 4 around $93,000. That's $45.48 an hour to be just at a survival rate. They're still making decisions, and that's if they have children that are in childcare. To really have a thriving budget for that household, it's $148,000. It's $75 an hour combined between both working adults. If you aren't making that now or you're not close, when you hear those numbers, what do you think? You're not ready to make the effort because you don't see a reality of how you can get there. That is what this Collective Impact Collaborative can bring. It can bring the tools from all of our great members together in a way that we can really empower individuals to stop just surviving and to see them thrive.
If I could, I think that's the collaboration that's happening here is so important to not just Worthington Steel, but other companies throughout Central Ohio, right? Because a lot of the folks that Doug and Tony are referring to, they are not even aware of the careers that are available, right? They don't understand. They're looking at what they see in their areas, and they're saying, well, I'm going to do fast food, and I'm going to work 3 of those jobs, or I'm going to do, I'm going to work in retail, and I'm going to have to work fast food part-time just to make those ends meet. But if this collaborative will really help us reach those people and let them see that, hey, these are not just jobs, these are careers. And I had no idea what was involved working at the Worthington Steel plant. I had no idea that people start there on the shop floor at an entry level, including our president of our company, who is now the president of Worthington Steel, right? He started years ago on the shop floor. So there is so much more that they can achieve, and there are companies out there like ours that want to help them get to the area where they are not so stressed about just paying bills and making sure that they can put food on the table for their kids.
So Lisa, Scott mentioned this term ALICE, Asset Limited Income Restrained Employee. So these are hardworking people who are struggling to make ends meet. What have you seen in terms of those entry-level positions and the needs of those entry-level employees? And has there been a shift in attitude and expectation of job seekers?
Yeah, I think that job seekers they want more, right? They need more, right? So they don't just need good paying jobs. They also need benefits. They also need to be able to pay good health care coverage to take care of their children. They need assistance with childcare, things of those sorts, right? So that's what they're looking for, and they're looking for a way to have a future for their families, not just a job. And so I think that's the most important thing that companies need to be thinking about when they're bringing people on board. It's not, this is just employee number 75173. This is Joe Smith, and Joe Smith is married to Sue, and they have 3 kids, and this is the entire employee, right? We have to look at the entire employee and what their needs are, and I think that's what our folks are looking for. I would also say that this collaboration, I think, will help with some expectation of those job seekers too, and knowing that companies may hire them as entry level, right? They go through some certifications, they understand how to use for our industry some basic tools, but they're not going to step into an operator role, right? So level setting that expectation to know, look, you're going to start in an entry level here, but you're going to be able to excel quickly. So I'm excited about that from an employer standpoint.
Excellent. And Tony, one of the things that we know being in this space is that we want to help people achieve self-sufficiency so they no longer need our services. But kind of the thing that we have to watch against or guard against is this idea that if you are a low-income worker who is receiving subsidized benefits and you get a better paying job, you may actually have a lower quality of life because you lose those benefits. It's what we refer to as the benefits cliff. How do we guard against that? And are there models out there that are trying to address this issue?
Yeah, that's the scariest thing. I can tell you all, when I was at Perscolis, shout out to Jen, when I was at Perscolis and in the tech industry, you know, the jobs that folks are training for are higher income jobs. Super excited. You have people come through and they would be afraid to go to their job interview because they knew that if they got the job, right, they were going to lose a benefit that the job was not going to cover. And so you do all that hard work. It's not about your intelligence or your ability. You pass all these certifications, 2 certifications in 15 weeks, killed it. So you know the talent is there, the ability is there, but my fear now is the system is not designed for me to get out of it. And that's a scary piece that we've built over time. I will say that when I worked with the county and we worked together to build an initiative called Tech Women of Color, we had some ARPA dollars, and one of the things they wanted to try and study was the benefits cliff. So what does it look like if a woman gets a job in the tech industry and for the first year we still support any benefit that she would lose? Giving her time to step her income up so that she wouldn't go under and we wouldn't make it worse for her, right? Who wants to say, I got you a better job or a good job, but I made your standard of living worse? And so doing that step down approach and seeing and studying the benefit of that to see how that would work and play out long term. I don't think it's as hard as we've made it. It's really baffling to me that that is challenging to say, oh, as your income grows, your benefits step down. That's not hard to design, right? But it takes will. It takes legislation, unfortunately, because the system that we have is legislatively in place. So somebody has to bring something to the floor to make the change. But it's a very real fear. There's a fear of success. If you have never lived an unsubsidized life, you are freaking scared, and especially about losing the housing voucher. If nothing else, making myself housing insecure because I got a good job, that's crazy, right? Or I'm working my job and my boss comes to me and says, hey, you've been doing a great job and we're ready to upgrade your position and it's gonna mean that you're gonna get a $10,000 raise. And you say, no, don't give me that raise, because if you give me that raise, I lose the ability to have my housing voucher, but your raise is not gonna cover what I would have to pay in rent this day. So keep your money and maybe give me a couple extra days off or something. Like, what's the about, right? So who wants to be in that situation? So we have to figure this out because it's a very real concern. Even as talent developers, it's a very real concern. We don't wanna just be moving people from poverty to Alice. We wanna move them out of Alice and into thriving wages, right? But we know that to do that, we are creating a vulnerability for a vast majority of people that we support. So it's a very real concern.
So Scott, along those lines, what does a living wage mean these days? If in fact people are struggling to make ends meet, even making some of these higher wage jobs amongst occupations like law officer or nurse. And how do you know of any other creative solutions on, so Tony mentioned a legislative change long term, but are there any short term things that we can do to address it? Or are there any creative ideas that you've heard of from employers to help address this issue with the benefits cliff?
So there are a couple of initiatives that are out there right now that actually play right into this. One of those is with Columbus Metropolitan Housing. There's a program they're launching called Ready, Set, Rise that is sponsored by Joyce Beatty's office. And it is that exact idea of helping those residents that they've had who have a desire to grow in income, to become sustainable, to figure out their purchasing power. And I think that's a really important term when we talk about someone who's receiving benefits. It isn't just a wage, it isn't just an income, it's their purchasing power, the value of those benefits. And so being better about calculating that for all of us will be important, and understanding how through the interventions that they have, they can actually support seeing some of their residents grow to the point where they're in market rate housing. You know, I think that there's also an initiative at Donato's where they're looking at a way that they almost hold a fund back, almost like an escrow account, so that as someone progresses, they have an emergency fund available to them until they're at the point where they're ready to come off of benefits, and then the funds can be released. I know that program was being piloted through the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services as well. The other thing that I do want to throw out, and I think this is incredibly important for all of us to think about, this isn't a one-system problem. This is a multi-system problem. The thing that we're excited about is that we are building a workforce system that can be at the table with other systems. You know, whether it's housing, whether it's food insecurity, whether it's transportation, whether it's childcare. With one missing piece, the cogs don't turn. And that's where we're heading now, is that we will able to fully integrate the different systems in a way that we can leverage the resources that we all have.
Thank you for that, Scott. That is very refreshing to hear Donato's piloting that effort. I know of another employer who basically gave us that idea to say, hey, if this is the benefits cliff, then why don't we go ahead and allow people to earn the raise that they receive, but we'll put it in a holding account and let it build up and collect interest over time until they're ready to go out without needing subsidy. I just thought that was a very creative way for the employer to address that concern and to be aware of it. But Tony is right. We need to work on a long-term solution, and that's why networks such as the Workforce Development Network and all of the people that we're working with are so important, because we need a long-term legislative solution to that problem. All right, and feel free, any one of you, in the spirit, I mentioned Wu-Tang earlier, and in the spirit of hip hop, feel free to jump in and freestyle, okay? So any question or answer that you want to respond to. So let me share with you all that Springfield, Ohio has recently been in the news, especially its population of Haitian refugees, most of whom are in the U.S. legally. Now, let me pause and say, it really disheartens me that Springfield is becoming so popular because of this political issue. I want you to think of Springfield in the way that I think of Springfield. Springfield is the city where legends are born. Elle Smith, the 2021 Miss USA, is from Springfield, Ohio. Johnny Stevens, AKA John Legend, is from Springfield, Ohio. And Bo Chilton is from Springfield, Ohio. So, I want you to think of Springfield as the city where legends is born. So I planted that seed, and you go ahead and let it germinate. One of the things that is happening in Springfield is a influx of immigration, and what people should know is Springfield is one of the Rust Belt cities who wanted immigration because of population loss and unfilled jobs, and so Springfield welcomed our immigrant community. It has created some tensions because it's been a mass influx on a very small city. But I can tell you most of the neighbors there really embrace our Haitian immigrant neighbors. One Springfield auto and farm parts factory owner with 30 Haitian employees sang their praises to a PBS reporter as being reliable and productive employees. He told PBS he wished he had 30 more just like them. So my question to this panel is, what is the role that immigrants and refugees currently play in helping Central Ohio meet its workforce needs?
I will gladly step in on this topic, Bo. Back in March, many of you may have seen a report that was released by the Brookings Institute in their Metro Monitor report, where it identified that out of the 54 metro areas above 1 million individuals in population, Columbus ranked 54 out of 54 in racial equity and economic mobility. Y'all let that sink in for a minute. That was right at the time where I was ready to make the transition into this role. Right at the time that United Way released their updated ALICE report. And so it honors us with an opportunity to identify how we create the right opportunities for every resident in this community. When we first heard the Metro Monitor report, I mean, we wanted to not think that it was accurate, right? We all heard that and we're like, there's no way. So we actually pulled data out of another system called Lightcast that lets us know about employment within industry, and they have an industry diversity snapshot. Columbus ranked 77th out of 384 metro areas for overall diversity. We're in the top 20%. And if we look at this room, if we walk down the street, anywhere we go in our community, we would agree with that. What it did was it identified the average diversity by industry out of all 384 of the metro areas, and it also included an industry that it didn't recognize that they called non-conforming employment. That employment would be things like food service, hospitality, retail, the traditionally non-wealth building type employment. Out of our diversity that we saw in that snapshot, over 50% of it sits in that non-conforming employment category. Let that sink in for a minute as well. Of the industries that were identified, we saw one industry where we as a community were above the national average of metros, and that was in distributive services. No other industry in Columbus is above the national average of 384 metro areas for racial and equity and inclusion. That is where we have a giant opportunity to fill the talent needs that all of our great employers have. We have to get our communities to really understand how we skill up, how we recognize credentials, and how we can move forward with that. That is the brilliant piece of the network, and it's why I was so passionate about taking this position. We have member organizations who specialize in a lot. We have 3 organizations who specialize in serving our immigrant and refugee communities. They have the ability to inform and educate the other 10 members on what they do and how they do it well. So we can now have 13 organizations that are doing this work. That's how we start to have a movement. That's how we start to gain momentum. And that's really where we have to focus to be able to solve the talent needs that you all have.
And I can tell you that Gomengito has a long history with our ESOL initiative. And that is the highest in terms of adult participation in our organization right now. That's the highest group. People don't come here to be lazy and live off the system and all these other stereotypes that are being presented. People come and they want to dig in and they want to figure out, I mean, if you had to flee your country and you came for a better opportunity, you're not going to necessarily sit around and say, now I'm waiting for somebody to hand me the opportunity, right? And so people are trying to figure it out. And I think that if we partner with them in a very significant way, I know Jewish Family Services does this work very, very well. We partner with them in a significant way, we will see the results that we want to see in terms of just like they've seen in Springfield, where when you give people an opportunity, you give them a chance, and you give them the right supports, they will help your economy grow. They will not be a drain on the system, right? And so I think there's just so much opportunity. I'm excited about it because I know that the students that are in our ESOL initiative, they're raring to go. Like, okay, what's next? I've kind of mastered the English language. And one of the other aha moments I had was, imagine coming here and you want to put your child in school and all that, and you can't even hold a conversation for a parent-teacher conference. Right? And so it's not about people, just joining the classes just because they don't have anything else to do. They literally need to figure out how to navigate and function in our community, and so that they can do some of the things that we all take for granted, as well as figure out how to get a job and get to work and get money coming in. And the majority of them are still sending money back home on top of trying to live here. And so that work ethic and that why behind why they come to training, we used to talk about the why. Why do you come? And I remember and when I was at Perscolas and we would ask people their why. And I had one young lady one time that was like, well, my why for trying to get a really good job is because I send money back home because my family is building wells for clean water to come to our community in our village. So she had a different why for getting up and coming to class every day and passing those tests and making sure she succeeded and then going after the job. So some of the qualities that I saw in our students and our young people and folks that are engaging, we could learn something from them about community and family support and pushing each other. And so I think it's so rich when we all just work together because we receive just as much as we give.
Tony, I have to say that fits in so well with Worthington and our philosophy, right? Giving back to our community. And those are the kinds of folks that we want to join our family. And that's what we call it, right? It's the Worthington family. Those folks who have a commitment, those people who have a passion that want to be part of something bigger, and that may be sending money back home to families, right? This family is so important, and I think Worthington has realized that in order to be viable in the future, in order to continue to grow and give back to our communities, we have to look for talent in other places. We can't keep doing exactly what we've always done, right? Back in the day, people would say, oh, you work for Worthington, who do you know? That's not the case anymore, right? So we know that we can't just be a company of referrals. We need folks that bring diversity of thought, diversity of opinions, right? And that's how we continue to be innovative and grow. And so we need to be looking in different places, and that untapped talent, that's what everybody's calling, right? Lately is untapped talent, but that's where we're looking as well. And so making accommodations and helping those people grow. And we've had conversations about how do we provide training or education for folks who are not, English is not their first language. So how do we help them grow and help them work safely in our areas? Because safety is number one, right? We're working with huge equipment. Those little coils of steel, the lightest one we work with is 750 pounds. So we have to be safe, and we want people to go home the same way they came in. So how do we do that? And we know that's an important part of being viable in our communities and in the future.
Excellent. I will ask one more question. It is the CMC's longstanding tradition to take audience questions. We'll move to questions from our live stream and in-person audiences in just a few minutes. If you have a question, please make your way over to the microphone in the back of the room where Doug is. If you are joining us online, please type your questions into the chat. Before we take audience questions, panelists, I have just one more question for all of you. Given what we talked about the importance of the migrant community, of immigrants to our workforce, we saw a warm embrace of diversity, equity, and inclusion coming after the death of George Floyd in May of 2020. And there seemed to be a real reckoning and awareness of the importance of addressing structural racism and promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion. Since there has been a little bit of a backlash, particularly with the Supreme Court ruling against affirmative action. Just curious, what is your sense of the status of diversity, equity, and inclusion in today's workforce?
Ooh, that's a deep
That's
question.
a big one.
That's deep
broad.
one, Bo. Thanks for taking that one. I mean, I'll kick it off. I may sound a little nonsensical, but
Yeah.
No, I have to believe, though, that we made some headway with that work. And what I believe is that while, the Supreme Court and others at the higher levels may have decided it's not important or it's creating reverse racism and all that, there are good people in our organizations that get it. And the hope is that there's leaders in these organizations, even if you're not the CEO, but you can still be an influential leader among the team that has decided this is what I want for the group that I lead. I want to make sure there's diversity of thought. I want to make sure there's ethnic background diversity. I want to make sure that, everyone has a fair seat at the table. And so my hope is that there are still those that are driving it, even if their companies decide overall they're going to make some sort of announcement that they no longer have, a DE&I initiative, or they've gotten rid of their department or their chief diversity officer. I have to believe that there are enough good people who will kind of carry that down through the organization and make sure that it happens. Now, I also think that we have to be open to calling it out when it doesn't. And I think we have to begin to police ourselves. We can't always rely on, someone said we have to do this, because that's when you don't have real change. They just do it because you have to, and then as soon as you think nobody's looking, you decide not to do it anymore. But we have to begin to police ourselves and hold ourselves more accountable for what we say we believe and what we say we want, versus having it be pushed down on us, and if it's not, then we can just kind of let it fall by the wayside.
I think I would like to add that although there has been that national perspective that has changed, this is Columbus, Ohio. Y'all have been here 7 years, and when I first came in, I heard about the Columbus Way. I moved from Indianapolis and thought, no, that's not really a thing, but it is. If we do the right thing in everything that we do, we don't have to worry about what Bo's talking about. When we look at staffing, if we hire the right person, if we look at building the right talent, if we look at just making every effort to do that right thing, it will become part of our normal everyday. I know in the John Glenn Leadership Institute last year at the forum, they talked about how it takes about 36 months to really implement a strong diversity, equity, and inclusion plan. Do y'all know how long the normal DEI officer stays in their role? 12 to 18 months. So things never get implemented. So it's exactly what Tony said. We have to figure out how we do the right thing every day to lift up the right initiatives to make this work. It's how we'll see success.
And I would say that at Worthington Steel, we don't have an official, director of DE&I, but it's organic, and I say that because our philosophy is rooted in the Golden Rule, right? So since 1955, we've been trying to treat people the way we want to be treated. I always say that we go to the Platinum Rule, which John P., when he was our CEO, he didn't sanction this, but I just said it anyway, right? I asked for forgiveness. So I just said I go to the Platinum Rule, right? So we treat others the way they want to be treated. I teach philosophy classes. Yes, we have philosophy classes at Worthington, right? We talk about it. It's not just words on a wall. It's not just, I don't have my badge on. Don't tell anybody. But it's not a card we carry around, right? It's a real thing. It's living, breathing. It's about behaviors. We, even during that time period that Bo mentioned, we went through, and I had the pleasure of visiting all of our facilities and doing inclusion training, is what we called it. Talk about the issues that we're facing as a country, talk about the issues that we're facing as employees, and noticing our differences, and these might not be things that you see, right? And I had the pleasure of sharing, by looking at me, you don't know that I was raised in Appalachia County, and my sister and I walked hand in hand out to the outhouse when I was a little girl, right? So people are like, what? You're not that old. Yeah, I am. But down in those counties, people didn't have indoor restrooms. We had water, we just didn't have indoor toilets, right? So those are things that people bring with them. And they go beyond the color of our skin. They're economic, they're demographic. My great-grandmother was 100% Cherokee, so I bring that with me. So there's so much more, and we talked about that with the employees and said, what are your concerns? What do you not know? Get to know the people that you work with. See them as human beings. And as we hire people, we bring people into our company, we look beyond those things too, right? We're looking for that individual. I mentioned it earlier. We look at the entire human being. Right? So it goes beyond that. And I think companies need to make sure that they're not making it an initiative. It's part of who they are.
Thank you. Doug, we have some questions.
Bo, thank you very much, and thank you to today's panelists. Great conversation. If you have a question, please do join us here at the microphone. We'll try to get to as many questions as we can. Great questions at CMC take 30 seconds or less to ask, and what punctuation mark do they end in? A question mark. Thank you, everyone. From the live stream audience, Michael Miranda asks, is there a central directory or organizational network chart for Central Ohio to help professionals be more informed on the best referral destinations for job seekers, particularly young adults?
Sounds like a question for the one-stop guy.
I had a feeling you were going to look at me on that. There are a lot of different initiatives that are working right now. If you actually visit our website, which is centralohiowdn.org, had to get the plug in there, we actually have a listing of all of our member organizations, so that's a great place to start. Smart Columbus is actually working on the Community Information Exchange, and that will be invaluable to all of us to be able to really identify all of the resources that are available and how we can align. They've had a ton of work that's went into this effort over the past 7 or 8 years. And they're making a lot of progress. We're hoping to go into a few pilots ourselves to be able to see how we can land that. That would be the best recommendation that I have.
I'm Jody Urbanski with the Aubrey Affordable Housing Foundation. We provide safety net affordable housing for men returning from incarceration. As a whole, returning citizens are some of the most loyal employees you could ever find. What can be done to advocate to increase the number of second chance employers?
I think you said the key word, which is advocacy. I think in general, people's initial reaction is, oh no, we don't hire people with backgrounds. And I would say, I think that has begun to change over time, especially because of the need for talent, and we have to explore all available possibilities. But I do think there's an advocacy piece and an education piece. And also, you know, sometimes when I have conversations with people, I'm thinking, think about the worst mistake you ever made and if it followed you forever and ever and ever, right? Like, come on. That's not, we all evolve as individuals, and we all, you know, have had things in our past that we just maybe didn't get caught, but we have things in our past that we're not proud of. And so imagine someone holding your biggest mistake against you for the rest of your life, and it impacting your housing and being able to feed your family and whether or not you can actually have a job. And so I think there's a lot of advocacy and education that can happen. And also, just like I'm gonna put a plug in here about skills first hiring and degree inflation. Just like not every job requires a degree, there are also jobs where your background really doesn't come into play. And especially when you look at what someone has done since they've come out of incarceration. They've worked to better themselves, go through job training program, go back to school, all these different things. And so there are other indications that will tell you whether or not someone's ready to move on. And we should honor that.
I would say as Worthington Steel is a second chance employer, we often look at it sometimes as a first chance employer, right? Because oftentimes some of the folks that are leaving their justice impacted, they haven't even had a chance. Right, so you know, every company has a policy, right? We look at everybody. We don't really ask about their background, right? That's not something, we don't want to hear it. I know from a recruiting standpoint, we're kind of like if someone says, you know, I do have a felony, and we're like, la 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 la, no, not really, but we have a strict policy about that. Okay, that's great. You know, everybody goes through a background check. You do have to go through a background check to work with us. And if you have something in your background, there is a review policy, right? So we're gonna look at that as a company and see if that is something that we can work with, right? I mean, our number one goal is to keep our employees safe. Everybody wants to feel safe and feel comfortable in their work environment. So we do, you know, consider those things as well.
And I think the other piece that's really important with that, as we build relationships with employers as a workforce development network, there becomes a level of trust. I know we've all talked about that. But there also is a two-way interaction there. If Lisa has someone who applies at Worthington Steel that doesn't fit what they're doing for hiring, instead of just telling the person no, that person should be referred to us as a network so we can then help them find what is the right fit for them. We shouldn't just discard candidates that we're not hiring. We need to keep them engaged because they applied for a reason, y'all. We need to figure out how we get them in the right seat.
Hi, I'm Karen Mosenter from Jewish Family Services, and I want to thank you, Bo, for that question about refugee and immigrant employment and the shout out, Tony. I would love to talk about that, but I know Doug would give me the hook. So I will ask a different question, and to start with Scott. Scott, you talked about employer or workforce adjacent services that members of our network are offering. And I wondered if you could talk briefly about the exciting initiative we're exploring. We're not there yet, but we could plant a seed, and it's to help local employers not only with recruiting talent, but with retaining talent.
Absolutely, Karen, and thank you for the segue right into that. We are exploring the potential opportunity to launch what is called an employer resource network. And in an employer resource network, it is employer-funded, where we would actually place a success coach on site at an employer's location, either one half day or one full day each week, 52 weeks out of the year. And the goal for that success coach is to help solve all of the issues that get in the way of employment. If you are a hiring manager, if you supervise, if you do any of that, you become a social worker because you're taking care of your people, right? So if we can have someone on site that can be that trusted voice that would help solve all of those problems so you can focus on your positions and what you need to do for your job, it's going to make your life easier. Our goal is to help improve retention. From the national level, most ERNs see about a 1,400% return on investment based off of what the employers invest into it, and that's based off of the SHRM data of around the cost at $7,800 to recruit an employee. But our approach is a little different because we are in workforce, right? So we not only want to stabilize, we want to understand professional development within the employer. How do we help someone stabilize and have a growth mindset? How do they promote from within so that they can see that upward mobility? Because right now, if they're just worried about childcare, if they're worried about transportation, flat tire, a dead battery, they shouldn't throw away the position and the opportunity and start over. We need to get them stabilized. And so we believe that there's a huge need for this within the community because we can impact our ALICE threshold households and actually see people turn to a growth mindset.
Thank you again. Retired journalist Carol Looper, watching online, asks, when the cooperating agencies work with a person to help find a job, is there a guarantee they'll find one?
No. There's not, and those are forces beyond our control. But we try to prepare people, and I think the biggest thing is helping people even deal with disappointment, right? And knowing that no doesn't mean never, and no doesn't mean stop. Because sometimes when you're swirling and you get a no, then you just feel like, let me just go back in my shell, let me go back home, back on the couch, because I got a no. And so what we have to do is build that resiliency and help them understand that no may mean not right now, no may mean that wasn't the right employer for you. We don't guarantee anyone anything other than if you lean in and do everything we're asking you to do, we'll provide opportunity and access, and we are advocating for you on the other side. And then, oftentimes, the reason I don't also want to guarantee is because people need to see themselves mastering getting a job. So it shouldn't be, oh, I got this job because Godman Gill got it for me. No, you got the job because you came and you got prepared. And then when we opened up the opportunity for you, you landed the deal. And so we don't guarantee, but we say if you do these things, we will put you in position. And then we will make sure you're as prepared as possible to go forward.
I would say employers can partner with y'all, right? Because we can give great feedback as to why the job was not offered to that candidate. What can they work on, what skill sets, whether that's a soft skill, whether that's an actual, mechanical or technical skill. So we could do our part to partner with you.
Really quickly, though, I will say there are some relationships, we call them customized training relationships, where there is somewhat of a guarantee. Now, I will say that. Usually the employer is funding it. You get the group of people, you have a set curriculum, you train them, and then the employer says, everyone who completes this successfully, I can pretty much guarantee, even though they have to go through an interview process, that they will land a role with our company.
Thank you. We have 3 minutes left for a final question.
Hello, I'm Jeffrey from CareSource, and I have a lot of members that will come up to me at events and state that a barrier that they have for working are two main areas, transportation and childcare. Scott touched upon it a little bit. So is it the employer, the state, or government's responsibility, or is this something your workforce can do to improve? If we can tackle that childcare issue, we can solve a huge problem and increase our workforce. And our kids deserve a great future. So what can your task force do to improve the childcare dilemma we have?
Yep, I'll gladly take it. This goes back to my comment earlier about aligning systems. We have an initiative for transportation right now that will be on the ballot in November for Link Us. That is an important step for Central Ohio to move towards rapid bus transit, to be able to help individuals get to employment, to get to the destinations that they need in a very efficient, effective, and low-cost way. We will gladly partner with the childcare system as well, because when we look at the wages that childcare workers are paid, is it a living wage? So we all have to advocate to find a way to make childcare, that industry, a sustainable industry. And we do that through aligning with different systems, with advocating to our elected officials, with advocating to our employer bases to figure out what the solutions are. Because the solution for Worthington Steel isn't going to be the solution for Kroger, isn't going to be the solution for another employer. That they have to be tailored to that particular industry, but we can be the voice that says, this doesn't make sense, how do we start to fix it?
All right, thank you. Doug, please join me at the podium.
All right, thanks. Well, I think today's forum showed that there are definitely two legends from Springfield, John Legend and Mr. Bo Chilton. Thank you, Joe. Nice job. We'd like to thank all of today's forum sponsors, Accenture, Battelle, Otterbein University, Regionomics, and the United Way of Central Ohio. Thank you to today's forum partners, Aspire and the Ellis. And we're also grateful to the presenting sponsor of our live stream, the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation, and our live stream partner, the Columbus Dispatch. And a very special appreciation to today's panelists, Tony Cunningham, Lisa Devine, and Scott Johnson. Let's have a round of applause. Please register and join us next Wednesday right here at the Ellis for our next forum, Housing, Health, and Hope, Opening the Gates to Opportunity in Central Ohio. Thank you again, everyone. Have a great afternoon.